So let's get started stamping these two cards. I start by placing a piece of A2 sized white cardstock in the lower left corner of my MISTI, and I'm going to stamp the first panel with the large image from the floral art stamp set. I'm not sure why I can't say that word, but I trip over it almost every time, in jet black crisp dye ink. And I'm going to do the same thing on the second panel of white cardstock, which as well is A2 sized. So they're exactly the same size, and using my stamp positioning tool, I'm able to keep each piece of cardstock in the exact same position so that every time I stamp an image, it will be in the exact same place on both pieces of cardstock. So that's going to be important later when we're lining up our spotlit die cut diamond shape. So now I'm going to move on and stamp the second layer, and this one is going to be stamped in Peach Perfect ink, and I'm just wiggling that around till it's lined up correctly. It's kind of hard to explain, but you can see when you have those layering stamps when they're in the right place, everything looks perfectly. And this stamp set is actually quite easy to line up. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp in Peach Perfect ink, and I do this twice. I didn't apply enough ink the first time, which is another reason why a stamp positioning tool is fantastic, because you can just go right back in, add a little bit more ink, and then you get a nice solid crisp image. Now on my second panel of cardstock, I'm going to stamp that middle layer in Cloudy Night ink. So this panel of cardstock is going to be the base layer for our spotlit die cut. So everything is going to be stamped in crisp dye ink so that our Peach Perfect flower is going to pop off the card. So I do that twice as well to make sure I've got full coverage. And now I'm applying this mask, and I stamped this earlier and fussy cut it. So I'm just placing that over top of my Cloudy Night flower, and I'm going to arrange the mid-size floral and a few leaves from the floral art stamp set as well. I'm going to arrange those just around the flower here until I like where they are placed. Not really any rhyme or reason, just until I'm kind of happy with their placement, and then I'll move on and stamp them in Cloudy Night ink. Now, one thing that's important to note with your mask, if you cut your mask too large, so if you cut it on the outside of this stamped edge, you're going to end up with a halo when you stamp those images over top of it. And what that means is you'll have a little white piece in between your base image and then those ones you stamped over top. So you want to make sure that when you cut your mask, you cut it just to the inside of your stamped edge. That way you won't end up with a halo. Now that's not such a big deal here because we are going to be matting our die cut, so you won't see any halo effects from here. But you'll see after I do the second layer, you can see that little white edge at that top flower. And I went ahead and just took a small blending tool and I filled that in. So that's a quick fix if you need to do that. But for this technique, I actually didn't need to do that, which I didn't realize until further on down the road putting the card together. But that's all right. You learn. So I'm going to just touch up that other piece, and then I'm going to switch out this piece of cardstock and I'm going to replace it with the peach flower. So I've switched it out, applied the mask, and now I go back in and I ink up my stamps, which I've left on the door of my stamp positioning tool. I haven't moved them, so they're going to line up perfectly with the previous piece of cardstock and the previous stamped images. So I go ahead and ink those up twice again, just to make sure that I've got nice, full, solid coverage. And I stamp those again. Just give it enough pressure to make sure that all the ink transfers, and now I can remove the mask. So I remove the mask here, and I just keep that with my stamp set to reuse in the future. And I take my diamond die cut And now I'm just going to place that, wiggle it around till I like where it is. And then I realized that I had not stamped that center image. So I go back in, I just put it back in my stamp positioning tool, and then I'm going to stamp that center portion, which would be the third layer of this, in Vineyard Berry. So I just go back in, apply the ink, and get that all inked up and stamp that center portion. So we have that all ready to go, and then I can go back in and apply my diamond die over top of that peach flower, and with some low tack tape attach the die, and then I'm going to run it through my die cut machine. So we'll bring the die in here right now, and the tape, and I just make sure that I have it placed so that I don't have it too close to either edge, because the negative portion, so that is the piece that's going to have the diamond shaped hole in it, is going to become the frame for the second card. So I take that die on that second piece, and I'm just going to go around the edge and with a black marker and create a frame on this card front. It just adds a nice little finishing touch. And so now I'm going to adhere that stamped die cut over top of the mat that I cut out, and I realized here my Altenew tape runner was out, so I had to go to a different one. So I just apply that tape runner to my die cut piece, and then I'm going to layer that over the black mat that I cut out of black cardstock. And then I'm just going to take this and wiggle it around till you can see till my stamped edges line up. So I've got that gray base layer, and then my stamped edges, I'm going to just line them up so you can see them poking out there into each other. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply some foam adhesive to that. Now I'm just testing this out so that I kind of have an idea of how it's going to go into place when I go to attach it here. So I attach the foam adhesive, and as long as I don't press down solidly on that, I have a little bit of time to shift it around as I'm ensuring that the stamped images line up where I want them to line up. And once they are in place where I would like them to be, then I can go down and apply some pressure. So I've got that lined up there, and now I'm taking the sentiment again from the Floral Art stamp set, and I'm going to stamp that in permanent black ink, the Altenew permanent black ink. And I love this ink, and I didn't have to stamp it twice. I was able to get a nice crisp image right in the first stamp. So now I love to add a little bit of shine or bling to my cards, so I'm going to go in my stash and dig out some confetti. It's almost like a mirrored confetti of different sizes. I don't yet have any of the Altenew sequins, but those would be perfect for this. And you can see I have my sand eraser there. I had a little bit of a smudge, so I just took my sand eraser and rubbed that off. But if I wasn't able to get it off, that's another great reason for using sequins or bling. You can just cover up any smudges there. Alright, so now to create the second card, I've stamped the same flower in peach crisp ink on another piece of cardstock, and I'm going to run it through my die cutter with the matching die. And you can see that the center I hadn't stamped. I did that off camera once I realized again that I forgot to stamp the middle. So now I'm going to back that die cut opening with a piece of white cardstock, but I wanted to add a little bit of color to that, just to bring in a little more color to the card. So I'm using my blending brushes here, and I'm adding a little bit of Peach Perfect, and as well I'll be adding Vineyard Berry. So I just want a nice soft wash of color. I don't want anything too solid or anything like that. So I go over this multiple times just to make sure that I've got the coverage where I need it. Again, we only need to cover the portion that's going to show through our diamond shaped image. So I'm going to adhere that to the back of my image there, and I've got that adhered there now, and I'm going to be attaching that flower, the die cut flower, again with foam adhesive. So I've got my foam adhesive roll out, and I just cut it down with my Tim Holtz scissors here, and just cut all into little pieces, get it all where I want it, and then I take it off and see I can just line it up so it covers up beautifully over the other base image. And so now I've got some gold foil sequins, and I'm going to just adhere these with liquid adhesive kind of all over the card front, some into the flower centers, and again, I don't have the Altenew sequins, but the gold sequins would be beautiful on this. And there's the second card. And here are both cards again. You can take a look at them. And the Spotlight Diamond technique, I hope you've enjoyed it, and thanks very much for checking out my video.